Hi, like you said, I'm Sherry Adami. I work for Cigna. I do talk fast, so if you need me to slow down at all, feel free to raise your hand and be like, wait, what did you say? I started with Cigna in February. They hired me to actually completely focus on getting metadata for their big data lake. They had quite a tall order going on, really. So when I came in, they said, okay, this is what we want to do. We want to be metadata driven. And the reason we want to be metadata driven is because we have a data lake that's now been up for 4 years. And in those 4 years, we've been able to load a lot of data to it. We've had some excellent successes in terms of presenting data and creating insights for our organization. But we want to see our speed to market increase so that we can deliver more data out to the business in a much faster way. We want to ingest data into the lake quicker. We want to make sure that the data is coming in of high quality and we don't have our data lake developers looking at spreadsheets of data to determine if the quality is high or not. We also want metadata management because what they really want to do is actually, what Podium does really well is create this shopping cart experience where you can go in, kind of shop for the data that you want, check it out, and then use it in the way that you need to for your position or role. They also want the ability to search across the whole lake, not just parts of the lakes. They also didn't want to talk to Don, who sits over in the corner and really knows about what's happening in the lake. And they didn't want to go out to the intranet sites that we had and look at the spreadsheets or the things that people have built to let us know what's in the lake. They want to be able to go into the lake and know what's there and perform a holistic search across the lake to understand what's there and what's available for use. All the while being agile. I'm really fortunate to work for Cigna. Their CEO has commanded and said that he wants all their teams to be agile. So I have 2 Scrum teams that work for me. We are doing agile delivery for the lake as well as for the implementation that I'm talking about today. And I think that makes a huge bit of difference. The waterfall approach just wouldn't work for this. You need that iterative process, especially with data, so you can evolve it and refine it to what you require it to be. So that was my task. No easy feat, that's for sure. So in their current state, we have tons of metadata. I'm sure you guys do too. How many of you have lakes? Data lakes up? So the Cigna data lake was about 4 years old, like I said. They didn't have a lot of metadata with it, but there is metadata across that organization all over the place. They have a formal data modeling practice that uses Irwin, so there's data dictionaries. They have a data stewardship practice, a full rolled out data governance council. Those folks capture definitions and have category work group meetings on data, capture everything in spreadsheets. We have a business process team that's capturing business rules, and they've done a really good job of partnering with an architecture team, which uses the TOGAF process. So they have ABBs and SBBs, and the business process teams engage with them and capture things like critical data elements, as well as connect the business processes back to the SBB level. So like they have all these complete practices, but very like, these people don't talk. I have to bring them together to talk, and it's exciting, I will say, right? They're all really smart, but have never really partnered together. So Cigna suffers from what I call the self-perpetuating disparate data cycle problem. Probably the same problem you guys face every day. You can't find the data that you need. Once you find it, maybe you can't access it, or you don't know how to access it. Say then you actually get access, then you're looking at the data and you don't understand it, and maybe you also don't understand what's been baked into it, so you immediately don't trust it. So now you've found the data, you've gotten access, but you're looking at it and you're like, oh, I'm not sure who's played with this, so you don't trust it. So for us, we had 3 major impacts from that. Our users don't trust the strategic data sources that we're putting forth, so we have a strategic data warehouse as well as the strategic data lake area, where we're investing time, resources, everything you can imagine into those environments, and our users don't actually trust what's in there. We also have decreased efficiency in the data preparation lifecycle. So taking the data from raw to ready. So once you take it out of your legacy system or whatever source you're getting the data from, and then get it into a place that it's prepared and ready so that it can be delivered out to the business or used in an analytic or BI data asset that's being produced, that life cycle for us took about 6 weeks. And I'll talk more about that as we move forward. And then the other thing that we're trying to fix is our risk exposure. So we have a lot of data in the lake right now, and we really need to understand what that data is and make sure that people access it appropriately. Because you can imagine if you don't actually understand the risk with the data, there is a large potential that users will be using that data in the wrong way. And you have people with inappropriate roles that are able to access and look at that data and manipulate it when they probably shouldn't even be seeing it. So for us, we said we're going to focus on metadata. And Cigna does everything big. I don't know what kind of environments you work in. I hope you work in the environment where you're completely empowered and you can make decisions for your role. I cannot, so I have to collaborate. So we pulled together a list of 26 participants from disparate, from different organizations, architecture, our data delivery teams, data analysts, some of our BI delivery folks. And we said, let's talk about metadata. What are the requirements for an end-to-end metadata process? And of course, the teams were awesome and smart. We came up with 105 requirements for what would be required to have an end-to-end process for metadata. So, and then we broke those down into 4 different types of categories. So we have business metadata. So business metadata for us is in scope, and that's really, you guys probably know, the business definition of the data, what the business thinks the data is. Then you have technical metadata, which describes the physical characteristics of the data while it's in our systems or moving between our systems. You have operational metadata, which is awesome because it describes the state of the data as it's moving through or sitting in our systems. That's where you get into things like data lineage, data quality, some of those usage statistics that really enrich your understanding about that data. And then we came up with a 4th type. We call that social metadata. That's not something that you'll see out in the industry if you go to data governance conferences like I do all the time. I love those. But for Cigna, it's really important. We have these teams of people that deliver BI and analytic assets out, and they know things like if you're joining these 2 tables, you want to filter out these values. Or if you're using this particular data set to get after this metric, you also want to get some other values from this smaller data set just so that you get a complete picture. So we're trying to figure out how do we take that and annotate it in a way that we can connect it back to the data sets so that we can reuse that information. And when people leave the organization, we don't lose that information. And also, that will help accelerate things that we're doing. And because we also don't do things in a small way, we looked at 20 different roles across the organization, and we determined that of those roles, many of them needed that business information. It's really the business context or the description. And of the roles that we looked at, only a small percentage of them, those that service and maintain data or deliver data out to the business, those are the folks that are interested in the technical, operational, and social metadata. So we knew we had to do something with business metadata. If you look at our current state, we have a ton of data all over the place. We have our Hadoop data lake that is growing every day. We have a data warehouse that we use for aggregated and refined sets of data. That's highly structured and is always specific to business purpose. We divide our data into data subject areas that the enterprise architecture team has come up with. And we have our particular business teams that are aligned to those data subject areas and feed us requirements for the views and the things that we want in the data warehouse. Yes?
Data warehouse came first?
Yes. Data warehouse is 6 years old.
Did it change a lot when you put the lake next to it, or is it pretty much the same?
I think it's changing now because we're agile. I wouldn't say because the lake is there, but I think the questions changed around the warehouse. Because we were populating the data lake with a lot of information, people were asking, why do we still need the warehouse, right? So we had to really address what the difference is and what the goals are between the lake and the warehouse. And we still have to do that on an ongoing basis, right? Because they're two very big costs that you do have to justify. Did you all hear the question? I should repeat those, sorry. So he was asking, I completely forgot. Data warehouse.
If the warehouse came first.
If the warehouse came first, yes. And how much did it change after we built the lake? So, yeah, the warehouse preceded the lake, and now, and I'll talk about it a little bit later, but now we really want to use the lake as the delivery mechanism to the warehouse. And, you know, we're doing that with Podium's help, and I'll talk about how we're doing that. And then we have an analytics and reporting hub. So within Cigna, we probably have every kind of tool you can imagine to deliver out dashboards. We have Tableau is the only one coming to mind, but that's really expensive, right? Because it's kind of a per seat cost. So we're looking at using Looker, which really decreased the cost for that and allows us to deliver data, publish data out from our lake using Podium, and anybody can come then pick it up and create a report or dashboard in Looker. So we're really looking at that. And then we looked at all the other tools we had for metadata, right? So I talked about all the disparate metadata. You really have to figure out where you're capturing that metadata so that, one, you can exploit the value of the metadata that's being captured, but two, how do you connect the dots, right? Because we're never going to have one whole place. We're always going to have to collect metadata from places. So we looked at all of the tools and said, okay, of the tools that are collecting metadata, how many of them do we want to continue with, and how many of them do we want to shut down so we can standardize on the tool sets that make sense long-term and are sustainable. So once we did all of that, we said, okay, we know what the end-to-end treatment for metadata should be. We know we want to get to a place where users can come and meet their data. You know, and like I talked about, we're not creating the metadata mothership where people come in and, you know, everything is there, data models and all the technical things that those security apps do to classify data and all of that. But they have one place that they can go where they can get lightweight business metadata, some technical metadata that makes sense, operational metadata, which is things about data quality, the ability to capture data lineage should we apply transformation, and then also can we annotate or tag data in an ad hoc basis. So we said we want to come up with this concept of giving people a way that they can meet their data in the data lake. So our analysts spend a lot more time using the data and a lot less time trying to figure out what that data is. I sat with analysts that would like download data and inspect things row by row. And I thought, this is like a major waste of time. But I'm sure there are a ton of analysts in your organizations and just across the world that really do that, right? Because the metadata is not there. That's a significant issue in terms of making our teams efficient.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
The Metadata Standards, how difficult was that to arrive at?
So the question was, the metadata standards, how difficult was that to arrive at? So for us, we just came up with the list of requirements that we wanted to use for metadata. And then I have experience with some of the published metadata standards that are out there if you Google that on the web. But we're focusing very specifically on things around the data preparation cycle. So we looked at what metadata do we need to accelerate that data preparation cycle. And then we looked at particular key deliverables. So here's our strategic approach. So for each one of the left side is really the component, right? The middle, the data governance and policy, ownership, inventory, and sourcing are really capabilities. And for each one of those boxes, we have specific key deliverables around metadata that we're focusing on. If we look just at the ownership box for us, understanding what the definition is and the business name for that metadata, as well as a data subject area that we've agreed with our enterprise architecture team, that's enough for us to understand what ownership is. And we are doing that. That's one of the things that we're successful with now that we're using Podium. So we're able to satisfy the requirements of that box right now by doing those 3 things. So for each box, we have a list of key deliverables that I wanted to share with you, but our legal team said no. So, but you can imagine, you could probably Google and figure out what those metadata key deliverables are in each one of those boxes, or look at my previous slides and see some of the information. So we just checked off, so what are the things that are most important to accelerate delivery of data out to the business? By setting things up this way and understanding those key deliverables, we can measure. So I'm producing dashboards that say how well our metadata is doing. Yes, sure. Question?
Can I make a suggestion? Can we
save questions to the end
and allow Ms. Adami to get through the presentation, and hopefully there's time to...
Am I running late? Yeah. What do we go to?
1:55.
Okay. All right. Well, definitely you'll be the first question.
There we go.
All right. So once we knew, okay, we know how, what we need to deliver to our users so that they can meet their data and understand it and then deliver it faster out to the business. I already talked about, we looked at how long does it actually take to deliver assets out. So we worked with our analytics team and our BI team and said, how long does it take for you to deliver an asset out to the business once you receive requirements? The average duration was about 6 weeks. There's a lot of things that happen in that 6 weeks, right? They're finding the data, they're maybe taking the data out, doing some inspection on it and all of that, and getting it to a ready state so that we could deliver something to the business, either a set of data to be used in another type of transformation report or dashboard, or the actual asset itself. We said we wanted to move that down. So we looked at different tools out in the organization, out in the industry, and said, okay, what are tools that will allow us to do those things that I talked about? Get data in the lake quick, understand its quality, pair it with some lightweight metadata, and then also allow our users to get at that data and refine, aggregate, or deliver the data to the business. We found Podium. And again, because we don't do anything small at Cigna and we collaborate all the time and want to make sure everybody's happy, we went out to about 12 different teams and we said, give us your use cases. And we came up with 172 use cases of how we deliver data out to the business, again, focusing on that data preparation lifecycle and making sure that we're pairing metadata and understanding data quality. We executed those use cases with over 60 users in the POC using Podium. It was awesome. Everybody loved it. We had people say things like, gosh, before when I looked at the data or I tried to do this with the data, it took me 3 weeks to do it. And in Podium, I was able to do it in under an hour, which was really cool. Podium gave us the ability to tag our data assets. So you can put on... my team is Enterprise Metadata Management team. So we came up with a list of standard tags that we use. So we know if we got the metadata from the data modelers or if we got the metadata from the data stewards. We're able to pair the definition, business definition, and business name. We're working with our cybersecurity team. So if they've classified data, we harvest those results and also tag the data with PII or PHI. Tons of things. So Podium really allowed us to do that. So now we're in implementation phase with them. They do the high-speed profiling. I haven't talked a lot about that, but so on ingestion into the lake, Podium allowed us to do high-speed profiling of all of the data that was coming in. So, it's just your standard algorithm that gives you the profile results. We have an enterprise metadata or enterprise data quality team that actually takes those results, will baseline quality, and then we're going to measure quality over time. And we're working with Podium to perfect that process right now. But we have the ability now to put out dashboards on data quality and show folks, where are the data quality issues that you're actually facing, and spur them to action. Because a lot of times we find these data quality issues, or the data quality team finds data quality issues, but IT is really not playing the game. So if you go to IT and say, hey, we're having this data quality issue, can you help us fix this in the system? They say, well, what clarity code do you have, or what project code do you have that we can build to? And we're like, We don't really have a project code. So then we'll go to the business side and say, hey, you're having this data quality issue. Can you engage with us to help us fix it? Maybe where we're capturing data or things like that. And the business doesn't really have appetite to make those changes or engage with us in that way either. So what we're hoping to do now that we have data quality profiling statistics on the data that we're loading in the lake, we're going to publish those things, right? So anything that's above 80%, 85% is green. Anything in the middle threshold is yellow, and everything else will be red. So we're hoping that that then spurs people to action, right? To maybe find a project code for data quality, or the business will then have appetite to fix their data and just stop complaining that the systems don't work, right? So we're really excited about that. And then they have other really cool things like data load statistics. A lot of people said they were from IT. This is super cool. You can go drill in, see what rows failed, what's ugly, what's bad, and have some indication of why it was ugly or bad, which is really good from a technical perspective. That's something that you wouldn't necessarily have visibility to with the traditional ingest and load of data in the lake. And then we're driving all of our security through, all of our security is metadata driven. The other cool thing is that you can do data self-service with Podium. So we have 10 sources. So we started April, May-ish timeframe with implementation. We now have 10 sources that we've ingested through Podium. We've also matched that with metadata that's available from the organization and dashboard out where metadata is not available. So even though our data modelers have always said we give complete data models of physical environments and all of that, we have proven that false. They don't actually. And we have also proven that their definitions that they say are the most best, amazing definitions are actually not. There are a lot of quality issues in the definitions that they have. I talked about tagging. I think one of the cool things that we're doing is partnering with the cybersecurity team. So if you think about tagging your data, you can tag it with, we're tagging with data subject area, so we know who the data steward is that supports that data or who the custodian should be for that data. But we're also doing that compliance bit. So all the data that comes in, we tag it initially as restricted until our cybersecurity team or another team gives us a classification for that data, and then we'll move it to a not restricted status if we find out that it's not restricted, and that is how we're driving our security. So anybody who comes into the lake, if they have access to restricted data, they'll be able to see it, and if they don't, they won't. Our cybersecurity team, by also being at the table, is giving us that deeper level of classification, which I think is tough to do. You have PHI, PII, we're getting those classifications, and we're getting things so typically how it works with PHI and PII is you get a list of fields from legal that say this is PHI or PII. We have that list of fields. It's not necessarily considered something that can expose or have increased risk if the field's sitting by itself in a table, but you still want to know that that field's there, so that if you were to join it with something else, it may increase the amount of risk that you have. So we are tagging at that deeper level of classification as well, saying that this is a PHI candidate per se, so something legal has said is PHI, but because it sits in this table by itself, it's not necessarily of high risk. So we're tagging the risk level with that. We have seen, in the POC, we saw about a 50% reduction in the data preparation cycle. Our targets we're shooting for are 20% reduction. We have seen fluctuation based on the things that we're giving out to the business, anywhere between 20 and 40% reduction in the time that it would take to deliver those things out. So we're definitely hitting our targets there, and everybody's really excited. How many of you guys use IBM InfoSphere Suite? Right? So for the people that don't, let me just describe. It's like a love-hate relationship with that tool. It is so complicated. It does really cool things in their newest version. IGC is pretty awesome because they've integrated some screens and stuff, but it's really complex and it's difficult to use. So it's hard to exploit value out of it. For us, we were using Information Analyzer to do data quality profiling and data certification through our data quality COE at Cigna. And it takes a long time to do it, and you only do it on sample sets of data. So you could never do a whole source. That would be crazy. In Podium, in the first, this is one of the first sources that we brought in. We brought in 787 tables and 18,000 columns of data. In less than 80 hours, we had profiled all of the data in that data set. And if we took the equivalent and did it with our previous tool set, it would have taken 40 days to do that. So, I mean, that's a lot of time, and it's quite amazing because now it's not a sample set of data that you hope, fingers crossed, is a good cross-section of the data that you have. It's all of the data. So you have a complete understanding of that data set and really can see the patterns of where things are falling over. And then I talked a lot about, I'm engaged with the enterprise architects, the data modelers, the data quality team. I'm also engaged with folks in the business teams that are looking to drive data delivery efforts within their organizations. And we're finally bringing all of these people together. And they really didn't talk before I was there. They didn't, like the data subject area, I was like, we need that consistent across our data stewards and our enterprise architects so that we know, like, we're all speaking the same language. And that's what metadata helps us do, is speak the same language, understand and interpret, what our data is and what matters to the business, right? So it's the first time we brought them all together. And it was very contentious. Like, the enterprise architect is like, nope, it is this way. And the stewards are like, yeah, but that's not really what we're experiencing out in the business. But we just push through that, right? Because we all have that ultimate goal of wanting to be successful. So our enterprise architects want to be successful, and our stewards really want to advocate on behalf of the data. So, those conversations are ongoing. We're coming up with different ways that we can tag data, things that we can add to the data that's of high value. We're working with our business process modelers to figure out how do we tag maybe some business process information to it and then tie it back to the SBBs so that we can do comprehensive impact analysis one day so that you could search against maybe an SBB and get back all of the data that's involved in that particular solution building block. And we're eliminating redundant tools. So we've kind of settled on some tools. We are using Irwin Web Portal to publish out our data models. It does a really good job of doing that. We're picking up information from those data models and pulling it into Podium. Podium allows us to, for the first time, pull everything together. When you look at a row of data, you see the metadata right there. You have some information about the data quality of that data, and you can also, look at a sample set of data or all the data if you wanted to. It has this cool prepare module that we're using to publish data out to some of our dashboarding tools like Tableau and Looker and some of the other things that we use. So you can prepare data, refine, aggregate, change, transform, whatever you want to do, you can do within that prepare module as well. It's drag and drop, or if you're really good at SQL, which probably all you IT people are, you can use that as well. So, I mean, it's pretty cool. We're really excited. So now, I think that's it. Oh, and I always say this, remember that the data will last a lot longer than the systems that it's in, so you really need that metadata. Yeah, so first question right there.
We talked about data owner.
Yes.
And also the tagging. But the data owner, is that somebody usually on the business side? Is it the business owner of the data, or is it somebody on the IT side? And then are you taking down to the attribute level, or just the data table level?
So the question was, when I talked about data owner, is that someone on the business or the IT side? And then when we're tagging data ownership, are we tagging down at the attribute level or the table level? So for us, data owner is the data steward. And the data steward sits actually within an information management team, which is a peer or a sister to our IT organization and our business organization. So it is we have a chief data officer, so we're focused on information. And that's where the data steward sits. And they work with a category work group, and those are your business subject matter experts, so people that are actually out in the business. So we tag a data category to something that then relates to a data steward. We do it all the way down at the attribute level. Podium gives us the opportunity to tag at all three levels. You can tag at a source, table, and attribute level, and we go down to the attribute level. Mm-hmm. Joe? Yes. Yeah. Sure. So the question is, we've been using the lake for 4 years. We just pulled Podium really in the last 6 months. Are we going to go back and inventory all the data in the lake? The short answer is yes, we absolutely are. The longer answer is the ingestion through Podium from the lake itself is quicker. So we know that we can do it quicker, but the problem that we have is that the data that's already in the lake, we really have to trace back to particular people that developed that data to understand what the metadata is, because nothing was done with metadata previously. We have targeted some high priority areas that have particular dashboards or things for our organization that are being delivered out now. So things that we know are high usage data, we're coming up with the metadata for that and doing the ingestion. So we're going to prioritize the different sections, because there's some things that were used maybe by data scientists or in R&D that maybe never came to fruition, or it's not easy to figure out how the data is being used. Does that make sense? Yes, question? Okay.
So the first one is regarding the metadata.
Sure.
So you touched on end-to-end metadata.
Yeah.
Right? And we are in the work for nationwide insurance, and we are in the process of our first step of building the data lake or landing exploration zone, if you will. Right?
Sure.
And you mentioned about end-to-end metadata.
Mm-hmm.
You have everything, the ETL, the data modeling tool, you have SelfService exploration tool, you name it, you have it.
Yeah.
How do you envision having, with all the interoperability challenges that we may have, do you envision end-to-end metadata in one place, or how are you going about it?
Yeah, so the question is, how are we actually doing end-to-end metadata when you have all these tools that are collecting all this different kind of metadata, right? So for us, we look at it again from the key deliverable perspective. What is the metadata we're going after? And then how do we make sure that it's in the right place at the right time? So for end-to-end metadata, for us, it's bits of process pieces as well as technology pieces. So we actually physically go out to the places that store metadata and bring them in using technology. So we'll bring that data in and ingest it in Podium as a source, and then we're mapping it to the data that we have in there. We also have a process by which we then transform that a little bit to do some compares. So if we pull metadata from this technology and this technology and put it together, is it the same? And if it's not, who's the team that's accountable for that metadata? And we notify them back that we've found disparity and they need to fix it.
Just to make myself clear, so
yes.
If it's from Tableau or from Irvine, you bring it to Podium?
Yes. So we harvest from Irwin, we harvest the data dictionaries, because a lot of the models that they do are at a physical level. So they have some logical models, but most of their models are physical. So in Tableau. Yeah.
How do you ensure, if I'm a developer, if I'm developing a workflow,
yes.
Without your knowledge, I run the workflow. How do you ensure that, like, you govern that? Hey, you need to ensure that there is a metadata for your workflow. I can, suppose if I have a Hadoop cluster, I run some Uji workflow or any other ETL workflow.
Sure.
But I don't inform you. like the governance team that I'm running a workflow.
Right.
How do you govern that, hey, your team has to develop a metadata for a workflow?
Yeah, so so the question was, how do you govern the workflows that are built? Because there's lots of tools and technologies that do that. So that problem will still exist. If the workflow is done in Podium, we have full visibility to that workflow that was done. Mapping the metadata to the new data asset is something that we're looking at. So if you transform the data via workflow in Podium, you will then again have to map the metadata to it. And because we're creating a source that has metadata right within Podium, we're able to do 80% of that metadata mapping in an automatic way. If the workflow is done outside of Podium, I have told the people that I work for, I don't even know what to do with that yet. I don't know. It's not in scope the first 6 months. So, yeah.
Regarding governance, so
yes.
we have PII, PCI, and in your case it will be PHI.
Sure.
Right? So what do you do? How do you say, because when you bring in those data, how do you carve out for people? Do you mask? Do you encrypt? Or how do you manage that?
Yeah.
People who can view it, who cannot view it? How are you managing that?
Yeah, so she's asking specifically about PHI, PII. How do you create a space to work in the lake that's actually compliant? It's difficult. So when I started, basically they were sending me all the tickets to get access to Podium. And I was like, who are these people? Like, I don't even know if they're supposed to have access. And am I just going to get it word of mouth that, yep, they're working on something and they should have access to restricted data? So we're putting in some process pieces which say that if they're going to get access to that restricted data, they've gone through an online training module that lets them know that if you have access to restricted data, here's what the options are. Either you handle it right or you're fired, basically, right? So we're training them so that they understand the risk that they're taking on by looking at that restricted data. And then we're also, all of our security is metadata driven. I can't speak totally to the technology, maybe Chris could talk to some of it, but we use Sentry. So we have a Sentry file that says what assets are restricted versus not restricted, and then people get access based on that. Once they have gone through training, their manager has approved that they should have access to restricted data. I've approved that they can have access because I know those 2 prior things have been done. Then they'll gain access to the restricted data based on what we've tagged it. Yeah. Process as well as making sure the tag's there. Yes?
Quick question. Do you have a central metadata management team, and if so, how big is it?
Yes, so I have a small team right now, team of 5. So we have 2 Scrum teams. We have a data lake Scrum team that focuses on really the implementation of Podium and making sure that everything is all okay with that implementation. And then I have a small team of 5 that help with the metadata. And it's really, those people are very articulate and can have the conversations that need to be had with architecture and the data modeling team so that we can harvest metadata. We're not in the business of creating metadata. We're in the business of harvesting metadata and then pointing out where the gaps are in our metadata so that somebody else can produce it. Yep. Sure, in the back. Yeah. I'm one of the people that asked, why do we need the warehouse? Right? So in my mind, when I see all the things that we're doing with the lake, I don't know how to justify it. But I have been informed, and it makes a lot of sense to me. That warehouse is really important because it delivers data in a very high-speed, performant way across large sets of data. So for us, we use a Teradata warehouse, and we have tons and tons of data that it's churning through for these aggregated views and calculations, and that's not something that we want to be doing in the lake. So once we have a refined set of data that we're ready to publish out, it makes more sense long-term and for many performance reasons why you need to deliver that out of a data warehouse. So that's what we say at Cigna. Yes. So all of the data that we bring into Podium, we bring it in raw because there's really two things we want to do with it. One, we want to understand what the data looks like from the source system that we're bringing it in so that we can measure data quality appropriately and then take appropriate actions to increase that data quality. And then the second thing is we bring it in a raw state so that we can then transform it or prepare it for delivery out in some way. So refine it, transform it, or use it in a dashboard somewhere. So we satisfied two things. Yes?
You build the facts and dimensions in Hadoop and then export it to Teradata, or you build it facts and dimensions within Teradata from the lake data, raw data?
So the question was, do we bring it into Hadoop and then put it to Teradata, or do we bring it into Teradata and then bring it back to Hadoop? We do both right now. The long-term vision is to only go one way, which is through the lake. Yes?
How do you keep the metadata fresh?
So the question is, how do you keep the metadata fresh? We have those 5 analysts and we're having the ongoing conversation with them to make sure that the metadata is up to date. And because we've ingested the metadata as a source within Podium, we have the ability to track and understand how old that metadata is, and if we need to go out and look for a refreshed version. And then we're working on how do we integrate better with Irwin so we understand when a data model's been updated with additional metadata, and then how do we get appropriate notification should the business glossary be updated or the data stewards do work that we need to harvest. Last question, I think? Yeah.
When you mentioned about reporting and reporting of gaps
Yeah.
in metadata, how is that working out from a process structure? Are people complying to and
Yeah, so the question is about reporting out the status of the metadata. Nobody's satisfied with that because everybody thought we were doing it much better. So it's doing its job. I'm going to have more people next year that will help do that. I'll be training the data modelers and some other groups in the organization to make sure that they can create metadata better. So it's definitely driving the right message, but people do find the actual statistics alarming. Yeah. All right, that's it. Sorry. I'm on LinkedIn if you want questions, and I would love to connect, like if you're trying to do the same things. I think we learn most from each other.